Hey Gloomies! This is my first video for my coloring book adventures, and I really hope you enjoy them. I will post more videos, but you can find all of my digital coloring pages on my Etsy shop page, and even the coloring books are on Amazon and on Lulu. The links will be in the below description. Okay, so since COVID lockdown happened, I have developed a very weird obsession for the art medium watercolor. I actually started painting oil paints again during lockdown. I was making an art piece for my dad for his birthday, which is the dogs playing poker art piece. And I painted that entire painting. It was quite a big painting. It was A0, I think. I think that's bigger than A3. But that was purely out of oil painting, and I remember how difficult it is to layer it. But the fact that I struggle with oil to blend a lot kind of made me research more into the different types of medium for art. And then I started getting into watercolor and this was soon after I lost my job as a game programmer at one of the top studios we have in South Africa. And I felt pretty worthless after that experience because I worked damn hard to get that position, and I worked really, really hard. And then 3 months after I got the job, lockdown in our country happened, and they had to make financial cuts, so unfortunately I was one. Then I felt really useless, and that was at the stage where I started dabbling in digital art, Blender. I was also trying to create my own things on Unity, and that was when I started researching more about watercolor. I only got more obsessed with watercolor after I realized that I could actually buy things off Amazon. The only problem in South Africa with Amazon is sometimes the products that you want to buy is $10 for example, of buying a set of 24 half pans, and the imports and duty customs tax is twice the value of that product, so you kind of have to think, is it really worth it? So you have to try find that product in South Africa either through different online stores. We have Takealot, which is kind of like Amazon but specifically for local South Africa. Some of the products are on Takealot and slightly cheaper, not that really, because obviously tax. So I got a lot of watercolor mediums. I got my sister's watercolor half pan set when she immigrated to the UK. So she gave that to me, and it's really old, and the colors were kind of the basic, I think there's about 10 colors. So it's the very basic one. So you really have to understand your color wheel. And one of my viewers, who actually has turned into a huge big gaming friend of mine, she's from Norway, and she's an artist herself, and she used to do watercolor painting and all these different, she was art school, so she's a really talented artist, and she suggested I start looking at all these different watercolor videos on YouTube and even Udemy on how to improve my skills, because watercolor is quite a tricky thing to get into if you don't know what you're doing. So I ended up getting books on my Kindle. I started researching YouTube videos, everything like that. I'm still learning and I'm still getting better at it. And I was practicing a lot with watercolor pans and really getting into using different types of mediums. Like Copic, they have a certain paint that you can use to add white markings. There was also finger wax, gold paint that I got for the horse's bits and buckles and different sort of pieces on my art style. And then eventually I was researching about the different type of watercolor mediums on YouTube, and I came across someone who was using watercolor brush pens. And I thought, that's interesting. I've seen marker pens because of calligraphy, but I didn't realize that you could use aqua brush or watercolor brush pens. So I started researching it on Amazon on where to find what is the best types of watercolor pens. So for literally about 2 months I researched this, didn't really get into it until I actually found at one of our local art stores, P&A, had these watercolor brush pens. So I jumped at the chance to try them out, and the one I got at P&A was basically a Chinese brand made one, which was really, really crappy. It didn't blend at all. So I scrapped that. I took it back and I told them it's not that great, it's completely useless. So then for another month I went searching online for other brands, and I came across Koi. And Koi watercolor I use for my watercolor pan set on my metallic colors mostly, and the bright colors, which I really, really love, but it's super expensive to get Koi brand in this country. But we went to one store in our big shopping mall in Johannesburg called Sandton City, and there was a particular art store, I think it was called Stationery and Prints, and they stocked all the type of brush pens that I needed. Like, they had Chameleon, which I haven't tried yet. I did buy one Chameleon pen just for the nude colors, so I can paint more of the skin tones. They also had the Koi brush pens that I needed, so I ended up buying both sets of the Koi for the skin tone color sets, the colors, as well as the grayscales. I ended up buying those 3. I got a discount from him, which was absolutely amazing. And at P&A as well, I ended up, because I really like the German brand Lyra, I think I'm pronouncing it right, and they have a lot of aqua art mediums. They have the aqua pencils, so I do have watercolor pencils. I haven't tried out the aqua watercolor pencils, but they also have the brush pens, which I also ended up buying. And in my opinion, the aqua brush pens from Lyra is a lot better than the Koi brush pens, because as you can see, like, I'm using it right now while I'm busy painting this one illustration piece that I made, which you can find in my Etsy store. I think it's under the title Magical Connection. And when I used Koi, it doesn't quite blend as well as the Lyra aqua pens. And as far as I could tell, there are 2 different types of packs that you can get. It's got the one pack that is like a green cover and another one that's like a pink cover. Those are the type of packs that I ended up purchasing, and it blends really, really well. It's a lot of smooth blending, and I didn't really find that when you use the pen on one part of the, I don't know, paper, and then you kind of pause for a second and then you paint over it again, or you paint next to it, and it creates that funny, like, that line. Sometimes if you that can happen, but it's not as bad as Koi. Koi doesn't blend quite as well as what I want, but I find that the Lyra actually blends a lot better. The one problem that I have noticed is, depending on the texture of the paper you use, weight doesn't really have a bearing. So if it's like 200, 300 GC, weight doesn't really matter, because my issue is the brush pens still bleed. So you have to be very patient, like with watercolor, where you layer everything, and you can either do wet on wet layering or wet on dry layering, which I find the wet on dry layering a little easier than wet on wet. But with brush pens, you have to wait until everything is completely dry before you apply more color to your art piece. Otherwise, everything blends into everything and then it just becomes like a complete mess. And I've had about 5 different coloring pages where that has happened to me, and I literally scrapped them. And remember, when you're doing a coloring page, if you buy my digital version, you have it forever. So if you mess up on one of your coloring pages, it is fine. You can still print it again and try again. The whole point of art is to improve. It is nothing about perfection. You will never get perfect at something unless you are a robot and you were designed to be perfect at this particular task. But it's human nature not to actually be perfect at something, but rather to improve at something. So the more you practice your art, the better you will be and more comfortable you will be, and the more you will actually be confident enough to experiment. So I was confident enough to experiment with brush pens, and they're actually really super fun. What I've been doing lately is using both my Lyra brush pens in conjunction with my koi brush pens. And the only thing I'm using in this video, you will only see my Lyra brush pens. I haven't used my koi ones in this one. There is a video up on my horse riding channel, which is Myska Rides Horses, and that is the video where I'm doing a ASMR kind of video where you basically see me sitting by my horse's stable, using my koi brush pens, coloring in a page, and my horse eating in the background. For me, I find that relaxing. If you guys find it relaxing, great. If you love horses and you're in lockdown, or you haven't seen your horse for ages and you miss that noise, that was the purpose of the video. I love making ASMR videos now of just my horses doing random stuff. I wish I could do more of them, and I wish I actually did a lot more of them when we were stabled at a riding club, which is over 150 acres of beautiful forestry land where, you know, my horse would actually go into this big open field with all these other mares, and you were surrounded by nature completely. It literally took about 3 kilometers to walk uphill just to take her to the paddock. I really wish I recorded more of that, but I'm starting to record a lot more now. Besides the point, that video is the application of koi, and I did enjoy using koi a lot. I've enjoyed using Lyra, but I think my go-to brand is definitely Lyra. So if you are a beginner at watercolor and you haven't bought yourself the watercolor pan set, I do recommend first trying out maybe brush pens and practicing at that, because the same techniques you would use in your brush pens, you would actually, you know, convert that over into watercolor paints. The one tricky thing about brush pens is your timing, I've noticed. So this is why I prefer Lyra, because if you paint, brush over something, like for example what I'm doing now, where I'm drawing all the blades of the grass, and then I'm immediately applying water to blend that around and get more green base color. The problem with some brush pens is it doesn't quite have the blend effect. If you leave it to dry for a few seconds, literally apply it, and then 4 seconds later you try add water to it to blend it, it doesn't quite blend as well, and it leaves a mark. And sometimes when you like take the water and you scribble and scribble and scribble, you end up with like a fuzz or like tear from the paper. So I think it is imperative that when you're choosing your watercolor type, it would definitely be advised to choose something higher than 200 GCM. I mean, even 190 GCM is fine, but anything lower than that, using any type of watercolor, the thinner the paper, the more chance of it warping. And that's why a lot of artists enjoy using a watercolor block or one of those pads that they're glued onto a board, like a cardboard, and you can paint over it and do whatever without you actually having to stretch out the paper. And I still don't know exactly how to stretch paper. What I have been doing is, if the paper is quite thin and it's a lower GCM, what I do is I add a masking tape around all 4 sides of the page. The one problem that you have with that is it can tear. So the lower the GCM, if you add masking paper and then you paint over it, really wait until the painting is completely dried, or the coloring page is completely dried, before you remove that tape, and do it very, very carefully, because you will tear the paper. So if you had a lot of money, you can get 300 GCM paper, which I find actually it absorbs more water, and also it doesn't buckle or warp as badly. Some artists prefer getting those wooden blocks, but if you are printing something directly onto a coloring page, you won't have that luxury. So the best thing to do is to buy 300 GCM paper. I've also learned that there are different types of watercolor paper. There is acid-free wood pulp paper, which is currently the normal type of paper that you'd find in lots of art stores, but you also get cotton, and the best type of watercolor paper would be 100% cotton, because it tears less, and if you apply masking tape to it or washi tape to it, it doesn't tear, because it's the texture is a lot more firm than wood paper. You can research all of this on what type of paper you want, but it all comes with practice and just testing all the different types of watercolor mediums that you can try, as well as the different type of papers, the different type of paint brands. There's even Etsy small businesses that they create their own type of limited edition custom watercolor pads that you can try. So I suggest that you practice as much as you can and aim for improvement, not perfection. So I hope that this video has given you some ideas on what the best type of brush pens to use and what type of paper you can use for any of your digiting coloring pages. But you will find all of my products on my Etsy shop page, and I would really, really appreciate if you guys could hit that like button and subscribe, because your support goes a very long way to help me support my small business. Once again, thanks so much guys for watching, and I hope you enjoyed